All right, it is now 6:03 p.m. We'll go ahead and get started this evening. When you are speaking, please be sure to unmute your microphone so you can be heard on the live broadcast. The public who did not register in advance can watch the live broadcast on the city's YouTube channel. For live Spanish translation services, please dial 720-386-9023 and use the code 104091 *.
I'd like to call the Planning Commission meeting to order, and at this time, can city staff perform a roll call?
Chair Bitloff,
Present.
Commissioner Kamak,
Here.
Commissioner Eggleston,
Present.
and Commissioner Van Dyke.
Present.
You have a quorum, sir.
Can I get a motion to excuse commissioners not present? Commissioner Japp.
Does that motion need to be seconded?
No, I need a motion.
Oh, motion. I move that, what is the actual motion? That we
To
excuse?
excuse commissioners that aren't present.
I move that we excuse those commissioners who are not present.
Second.
We have a motion by Commissioner Van Dyke and seconded by Commissioner Kamak. For this item, we will have a voice vote.
Chair Bitloff,
Yes.
Commissioner Kamak,
Yes.
Commissioner Eggleston. And Commissioner Van Dyke.
Yes.
Can I have a motion to approve the revised November 2nd meeting minutes?
Are we going to say the pledge?
Not today. It's not on the, we haven't done that for a while, so we can add that to the next meeting in
Okay.
the order. But can I get a motion to approve the revised November 2nd or November 20th meeting minutes?
So moved.
Do we have a second? So we have a motion by Commissioner Kamak and a second by Commissioner Ingleson. Let's open the electronic voting.
Commissioner Kamak. Thank you, sir.
We have 4 yeses, 0 noes, 0 abstains. Can I get a motion to approve the January 2nd meeting minutes?
So moved.
Second.
I have a motion by Commissioner Kamak and a second by Commissioner Van Dyke. Let's open electronic voting. We have a result of 4 yes, 0 no, 0 abstained. We will now open the public hearing, and I will ask the Deputy City Attorney to please announce the first case.
Good evening. Tonight's first case is CUP 23-0003, the South Adams County Water and Sanitation District, on behalf of Kroenke CC Properties LLC, is requesting a conditional use permit for a water treatment facility for the property generally located at the northeast corner of East 74th Place in Quebec Street, west of 7400 Quebec Street. It's currently zoned public, consisting of approximately 9.738 acres. Presenting the matter on behalf of the city tonight is Stacy Wassinger.
Good evening. As stated, I am here to present the staff
presentation for CUP 23-0003. So to orient you to the vicinity here, the blue on this map is the existing Klein water treatment facility off of Quebec Parkway and Quebec Street, or in between Quebec Parkway and Quebec Street. The outlined in red is the subject of this conditional use permit request. So this is adjacent directly west of that existing water treatment facility, and it is a request for a CUP for a water treatment facility. The current zoning is public, with the zone change heard by this commission in November, and it was passed on second reading February 5th, 2024. The future land use is commercial and utility. It's just under 10 acres, and there is a development plan in concurrent review. So here's a aerial map of the existing site, showing that it is a vacant parcel right now next to the existing water treatment facility buildings. The public zone does allow for a water treatment facility by conditional use permit. The proposed use here is a approximately 17,000 square foot building that will treat PFAS to serve current and future needs, and all treatment equipment and activity will be located in this building. This proposal will also install landscaping, additional parking, and associated site improvements to this new water treatment facility site. And there is a potential expansion to the area east of this proposed building, which I will show you now on our little diagram here. So the outlined in blue is the proposed new building with this at this time. Purple is a potential expansion area. The yellow circles are access points, existing access points, and the green is the landscape area. Noting that the existing gated access out to Quebec Street is limited access, and most or all commercial traffic will be coming from Quebec Parkway through the existing Klein water treatment facility to this site. So for the case analysis, this proposed use is consistent with the public zoning that allows for a water treatment facility by a conditional use permit. There was a noise and vibration study conducted by the Water District. And as part of that study, no known mitigation was needed or proposed to any noise or vibration. The DRT, Development Review Team agencies, have reviewed this project, had no outstanding comments or objections, with 4 suggested conditions. And so as I go into that, there is sufficient evidence to demonstrate that the CUP meets the approval criteria in the Land Development Code with these 4 conditions. We'll go into those in a little more detail here. You may recall with the zoning case that there was a condition on the zoning as well about essentially creating a separate parcel, and this first condition is related to that, and it is meant to meet the approval criteria A1 of the conditional use permit, which is essentially tied to meeting all standards of the Land Development Code and other regulations. Condition B is the landscaping to be oriented more towards the western portion of the site to provide a vegetative buffer for the existing residents west of this site off of Quebec Street. Condition C proposed is that commercial vehicles shall not enter or exit through through Quebec Street, so they would be limited to accessing through Quebec Parkway. And the condition D is that a drainage easement be required over the stormwater retention area. So for public comment, there were emails and phone calls received as part of the zone change application, but staff has not received any emails or phone calls as related to this CUP application. There was public comment made at the PC meeting for the zone change. Subsequent to that, the applicant held a neighborhood meeting on November 29th, 2023. At that time, the neighbors expressed concerns regarding noise and vibration and lights. And the applicant proposes to coordinate landscaping solutions with the neighborhood on, to address some of those concerns. The case considerations contained here is that the CUP is consistent with the comprehensive plan goals and objectives. This facility would provide capacity for existing services and future growth. The city's E3 environmental or energy equity and environmental division supports the project to reduce PFAS contamination. That noise and vibration concerns have been expressed by the neighbors regarding the existing facility, and that the Water District anticipates that federal mandates will require this type of treatment to get to those specified levels of treatment. So this is all of the approval criteria for conditional use permit for reference. We can go into these in more depth if the commission would like, but I just wanted to provide those here. And then conclude the staff presentation, which staff is available to answer any questions. The applicant is also present to speak on behalf of the request.
Do any commissioners have any questions for staff at this time?
I have a question. Cronky, or one of the Cronky affiliates, owns the land, is that correct?
That is correct.
And is that, I presume it's a long-term lease on the land lease, or what's the arrangement between the city, between South Adams and the Cronky organization?
So the Water District did provide with this application, they have a land use purchase agreement? Possession and lease agreement, thank you. Possession and use agreement. So they have an agreement with Cronky for essentially the eventual purchase of the property, but I would defer to the Water District for any specific questions on that agreement.
Is that a 30-minute or a 5-year or a 100-year lease or document?
It is a purchase agreement in the end, so the district will own the property. They will not be leasing it from Cronky.
Is there a date on that?
A date for the transfer? Their document does have, and I'm sure their representatives here can address this in more detail. Their document does have deadlines set out as to when that would happen. There's actually built into that agreement a window to allow the city to be involved in an effort to acquire property on behalf of Cronky and transfer property to Cronky to meet an outstanding obligation that the city has to the Water District and then acquire that property for the district. It's kind of complicated, but basically a three-party swap is kind of what's contemplated by their agreement if the city wants to be involved in that. At this point, I do not have any details on where city management might be with regards to that. But even if the city does not participate, then at that point, the Water District would be paying Cronky directly for that property. It'll happen all within this year.
I'm sorry?
It'll all happen within the year, within this calendar year,
Within this
correct?
calendar year?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes, that's correct.
So as it's written, will the city own the land or South Adams own the land at the end of this year?
South Adams County Water and Sanitation District will own that land.
Okay.
And at this time, Cronky is a co-applicant on the application, of course.
So I have a question about, it said in the conditions about the warranty deed. So does that mean the special use permit will not go into effect until the warranty deed is to South Adams County?
No, it would essentially allow, so is it a condition of approval which allows for, if they do not meet those conditions, that the conditional use permit could potentially be revoked based on not meeting the conditions?
Any other questions for staff? I have one question if no one else has a question. So just related to the acoustics report and noting in there that there was language saying about, let me see if I can find it, the specifics. And this question may not be better for the applicant, but it was saying about how the treatment plant would likely be considered a light industrial use by the state. And the state light industrial limits are between 70 decibels during the day and 65 decibels at night. And in the report, it notes many periods where it's above that level, where the residential level is at 55 decibels. And I understand that the trees are being proposed to help mitigate that limit, but that's for the current operation of the plant. What about, or has there been any forecasting for the future state of the future plant? Because I know they can't test for the unknown, but having heard that as a major concern of neighbors, just that's been taken into account.
Yes, that is the intention of that condition, is to help address that concern, and the Water District has expressed, and I will defer to them for more detail on this, that they would work with the neighbors to address those concerns with the existing facility. But, and you're right, the noise study is for the existing facility, which is not necessarily part of this conditional use permit application tonight, but can defer to the applicant with additional detail on that.
So yes, at this time, we'd like to call the applicant forward to the podium. If you could state your name and your address.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the commission. I am Kip Scott. I'm the Special Project Manager for South Adams County Water and Sanitation District. I didn't have a formal presentation tonight, but I wanted to try to answer questions. I think in November I gave a pretty long presentation, and in respect of your time, I wanted to try to keep it short tonight, but I'll try to address a couple of the issues that came up. On the screen is the current facility, and just to the left or west is the undeveloped piece of property that we are acquiring from Cronky Enterprises. We have a possession and use agreement with them, and as Mr. Hayter explained, that gives us full use of the property. We're trying to allow this three-way land deal with the city, with Cronky, and with us to have time. But if that doesn't develop over the course of this year, the district will purchase the property from Cronky. So we will have full possession of it in perpetuity.
Question about that. Did Cronky own the land before we built the original facility there? Before we changed the road on Quebec? And
They did not.
who owned it?
That would have been the Department of Army, and maybe there was a owner in between them and Cronky, but
So when you built the original building, who owned the land?
the Department of Army.
Okay.
In this facility that you see was constructed in 1989
Right.
based on a grant from the Department of Army, who was in control of the Rocky Mountain Arsenal at that time, along with Shell Oil. So the construction of the current site was from 1989, and before this was developed, before Quebec Parkway was in place.
Mm-hmm. Thanks. Just, whoops, I'm a slow thinker sometimes. Why didn't South Adams buy the land from the Army? How did Cronky get involved?
I would say that predates my history and knowledge. At the time, we had enough property for the treatment processes that were needed. The district didn't need any further land at that time when Cronky purchased that property. Assumption was, I don't know, 20 years ago? No, it was, yeah, around 2000.
Did Cronky own it prior to when they replanned Quebec with the curve and?
I couldn't answer that.
I don't know that has a lot of bearing, but one of the things that I'm concerned about water is the more people's fingers you get into these decisions, why the less control we have over our city. And God bless Cronky and South Adams and everybody else, but it's always a little bit tenuous when pretty soon you have somebody pop up and, well, they have input or they have control and so on and so forth. And it just, I would be curious to know how solid the contracts are for South Adams ultimately to own this piece of property if we're developing it and preparing for long-term. Does that make any sense to anybody? I mean,
Let me also recognize our district manager, Abel Moreno, who's here with me. He's involved in more of the land negotiations and the purchase, and maybe he can answer that more directly than I can.
Good evening. Thanks for seeing us this evening. I have been in discussions with the Cronky team to answer some of your questions. I believe between the Army and the district here, the city owned the land. The city sold the land to Cronky. I don't know what that transaction was, but the Department of Army and the city negotiated an agreement where the land was transferred to the city for ownership many years ago.
gotcha.
And then from that, the city sold the land to Cronky. And Cronky owns everything around, all the way up to Highway 2 and Quebec Parkway.
Right.
And so I think it's roughly a 30-acre or so parcel of land, maybe a little bit larger. We're parsing off 10 acres of that. And that, the district is wholly in control of that land today. We have a possession and use agreement. We are working with the city and the Cronky team to transact a three-way land swap. That's why we don't own the land yet. We are giving the city and the Cronky teams time to work through the land issues here at the Dick's Sporting Goods Park site, as well as land that we own at 84th in Quebec. The city wants our land that we own at 84th in Quebec. Cronky wants more land that the city owns here at this site. We have land, Cronky has land here that we want for our plant. So that's how this whole land arrangement was born. And when we negotiate a possession and use agreement, we couldn't continue to wait for the three-way land swap to come to fruition before we needed to acquire the land, given the EPA's proposed maximum contaminant level around PFAS. We knew it was coming. We had heard it was going to be getting dropped at the end of 2022. It ended up getting proposed in March of 2023. We've heard that the MCL would be adopted by the end of 2023. That didn't happen. It sounds like the end of the first quarter 2024. When an MCL gets proposed and adopted in the EPA world, that means as a water district, we have to comply with that regulatory standard. So PFAS is going to be a regulated contaminant that we have to manage. Ordinarily, when an MCL gets adopted, the district has 3 years roughly to fall in compliance. This project is about a 35-month project. So we intend, assuming that things go favorably for us through this process, that we intend to break ground in March or April of this year. 35 months from there is sometime in early 2027, per our contractor schedule today. The land swap agreement contemplates that, the district has eminent domain powers. So if we're unable to negotiate a sale price at the time that we need to get the land, the agreement with with Cronky says that in 12 months, the district will acquire that land. And so that 12-month window is August or end of July of 2024. We have given an additional 6 months from that 12-month window. If the city and Cronky are in negotiations and they can negotiate a memorandum of understanding, our agreement allows a 6-month extension. So potentially it could go into 2025, but it just all depends on how this three-way land swap comes to fruition or not. If it doesn't come to fruition, we intend to start discussions with the Cronky team, most likely in June of this year, to transact financially the purchase of the land. But we already own the land legally because we're in possession of it. Long-winded answer to your question, but a little bit of context there for you in terms of where we got to how we got here.
It's not important, but I'm curious why all of this came up, or didn't come up in the prior 20 years when it was originated, you know.
The simple answer to that is we didn't identify the PFAS contamination in our water supply until 2018. And we have been working since that time to identify appropriate solution to address it, following the standards, the reduction in standards. And the solution that we is the best solution for the district and for the residents of Commerce City is the treatment plant that we've designed to build on this
Sure.
piece of property.
Thank you.
So, just real quick, this project is to protect public health. It's a smart investment and works to keep the rates affordable because all of our infrastructure is at this site already. So the site is what is critical to keep costs down. We want to provide excellent customer service that also goes along with being a good neighbor. We're going to talk about that a little bit, about the noise study and landscaping. And obviously, this is to provide high-quality drinking water and meet future regulations that are coming at us. So this is the project area. This is the site. The box or the rectangle right in the very center is the building that will be constructed. From that building to Quebec Street, there's still 270, actually over 272 feet. I know Stacy's diagram that she showed, right now we plan on concentrating trees or plantings in this area. Not sure if the pointer works, but to the west of the building and to the east of Quebec Street. There's an oval in your packet that shows this landscaping, but we want to work with the neighbors that are across the street over the next several months to develop a plan that they can buy into. As Stacy mentioned, we had a public meeting with the neighborhood. We'd like to meet with them over the next several months, talk about the trees that we can plant that meet Commerce City's requirements, but also what they would appreciate visually and what will make the most sense for sound. I know the one commissioner brought up the issue of, will this facility increase noise? And the simple answer is the technology and process that is going into this building is very similar to the technology and the process that is in the Klein Water Treatment Facility currently. So we can project how much noise will be made by this facility. And the answer is, outside of the building, there will be no noise. So the noise study that the district facilitated identified that there is noise, but that's primarily from activities outside the buildings during the day. We do have standby generators on site that were running during this period. The noise study did not pick up those generators. So again, the ambient noise that is shown from the study is really there all the time. It's not from our facilities. It's not from the generators. To give a better perspective, this is looking east from the neighborhood towards the current facility. And again, the new facility will be right in the center, if you will, to the right side near the entrance road. The noise monitors were placed at the property line of the current district and at the property line of the new property. And again, the noise levels were found to be well within the state standards. The city does not have its own noise standards, but again, they were below the state standards. With that, hopefully I've addressed a few of the questions that came up, but I'm going to stop, and if there's any other questions I can address, I will.
Yes, thank you for answering my question, especially about the noise. But that leads to another question, and I think it's just related. It's also in the acoustics report, and it relates to the truck traffic, but it would also be about commercial access from Quebec Street. Can you speak to that? Because there's just some criteria that we have outlined for us. If you could explain how vehicles will ingress and egress from the site.
This doesn't show it real well, but to the far right is Quebec Parkway, and down in the right-hand corner of this picture is what we call the east entrance. All truck traffic enters and exits the facility from that location. This, you can see the entrance that comes off of Quebec Street here, the gated entrance. That is primarily used just by district vehicles and staff vehicles. I did want to highlight one of the staff recommendations is a condition that all commercial vehicles need to enter off of Quebec Parkway. And it didn't dawn on us until just a couple of days ago that commercial and vehicles includes like delivery trucks like UPS and FedEx. Discussing with the staff tonight, we would ask if we could modify that so that it says all commercial vehicles greater than 2 axles have to enter or exit off of Quebec Parkway. In other words, allowing two axle vehicles to come in off of Quebec Street as they do now.
Is it a requirement of the fire department that intersection exists, or it was just there before you built originally? I mean, could it be closed? I mean, is there any reason that you have to have that? You have two accesses to the facility other than that one, correct?
That is correct. The fire department requires two egress points into the facility.
Right. But this is the third one. Is there any reason why you?
No, there is 2 now, and there would only be 2 in the future. We're not proposing another entrance.
Okay, I thought you had one on the north part of, northeast side.
That third circle that was shown is internal to the site. It was just showing how there's an access point between the existing facility and the facility to the west. So that's an internal road between the 2 properties, but it does not access a public roadway.
Right, no, I understand that, so, thank you, gentlemen.
I have a question, going back to the noise studies, when were the noise monitors placed and how long were they left there for?
They were installed for a period of 8 days. I apologize, I do not remember the exact days, but it was in November for a period of 8 days.
Okay.
November 29th.
For 8 days. November 29th, they were placed? Yeah, okay. So then why were the residents complaining about the noise from the facility if the noise monitoring didn't pick up any noise?
So we do have maintenance activities that occur on the site. We actually had one resident that did a recording of noise that he'd heard. I think it was the week right before the zoning hearing in front of this group. We identified that was from a maintenance activity that we were carrying out on site. It's only during the day, and it only happens typically twice a year, spring and fall. And it's basically vacuuming out a basin where treatment facility residuals go to. So we use a vac truck to remove those solids out of the system. And a vac truck is, you'll see it on the roads, used a lot now in construction for vacuuming. And that's what he recorded and what he'd heard. Again, those are maintenance activities that occur during the day.
How does the additional facility increase that kind of maintenance activity? I mean, do we expect a significant increase in those kinds of maintenance activities given the additional facility?
The treatment technology that we're implementing, as I said, is very similar to the Klein. It will actually, at the Klein treatment plant, we change out carbon about 20 times a year. The new facility, ion exchange, is more efficient than the carbon. We will be changing it out about once a year. So it'll actually be less activity on the site from the ion exchange. There is noise from those trucks when they're unloading and offloading during the day. That's about, estimate 12 days a year.
I have another question. Where are the generators located compared to the treatment facility now? Are they on the east side of the building or the west side of the building?
So on the far right, there's a row of garages. Excuse me. Just north to that, there's a white rectangular generator. And north of that is another generator that's on the east side of the property. And then there is another generator that sits perpendicular to the site, just above that, the rectangular building that's on the right. You can.
So they're all on the east side of the property?
This is one generator. This is one generator. This one generator.
Okay. They're all on the east side of the property?
That's correct.
Okay.
Any additional questions?
There was a map that showed a future building that was going to be built possibly next to it, the future water process?
So our preliminary planning has identified this potential site right next to the PFAS treatment building for an additional treatment component, for an additional contaminant that we may have to meet regulations for in the future.
Okay, and then the water is in the water treatment facility. Is that clean water? And then how is it gonna go through the PFAS facility?
So all of our raw water pipes from our wells come either down Quebec Street or up Quebec Street and are right here. They will come into the facility. They will go through the PFAS treatment. They will come back out. They will go through the Klein facility and then into the water softening facility. And then from the water softening facility, the water is distributed to the residents. That's potable drinking water.
Okay, thank you.
And that brings up a good point. The non-potable water, what part of that is involved with the non-potable systems and if any?
This facility does not, the non-potable system is part of our irrigation supply, basically north of 96th. This facility only supplies potable drinking water throughout the district service area, which is Commerce City, some parts of unincorporated Adams County. But the irrigation supply is completely separate supply from a different set of wells in the northern part of the district.
Where is that facility located that serves non-potable distribution?
So we have for the non-potable system, there is a reservoir and pump station located at Landmark Drive and approximately 104th.
Okay.
So with construction going on, how long is the construction gonna be performed?
As District Manager Moreno stated, we hope to break ground probably April of this year and finish right now either December of 26 or January of 27. The biggest part of construction will be for the next 2 years, and then primarily 26 will be indoor, finishing the building inside. So, you know, when we are talking to the residents, we do understand that, you know, they have concerns about the construction activity that will occur for the next 2 years.
Right. So I'm wondering how that's going to affect them, or what can you do to help decrease the amount of activity that's going to affect them? Because, you know, living next to a construction site, there's construction going on in my neighborhood, and there's dust everywhere, there's dirt, you know, it's dirty. And so how is that going to be decreased so that it doesn't affect that neighborhood
So
as much?
we have partnered with one of premier contractors within Colorado that builds treatment facilities, and they're well aware of neighborhood issues, building facilities close to neighborhoods, and actually a lot closer than our facility. Again, keeping in mind, we have about 300 feet of buffer between there. But to specifically answer your question, we're going to be diligent of keeping dust down using water suppression. We are only constructing during the day, 8 to 5. We're not going to be working late hours or working weekends. You know, there will be construction noise during the day, but it will not be, once the building's constructed, it will be very minimal.
Any other additional questions?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Do any members of the public wish to provide comments on this case?
Emmanuel Diaz,
Hello?
hi. Francisco, were you able to understand him?
Not at all. This gentleman called during the city council meeting yesterday, and it was a similar experience. I tried to talk to him, and he didn't respond. He had requested a Spanish interpretation yesterday. Today, I don't know if he requested it. But I can try to talk to him again and see if he responds. Buenas noches, estoy aquí para proveer interpretación. Si puede, ¿me entiende lo que le estoy diciendo?
Francisco,
Yes,
were you able to understand him?
not at all. And apparently he doesn't understand me either.
Okay, thank you.
You bet.
All right. Are there any further discussion items?
I have a question for the planner. Initially, I think it was presented as a water and wastewater facility. Has that been corrected? It's not part of a wastewater facility, I don't believe.
You're correct. This facility was never proposed to be wastewater facility. In the land development code, the land use item is water or wastewater treatment facility. It requires a CUP, so that is the exact wording of code, that would require a CUP for a water or wastewater treatment facility.
Anything else? At this time, I will now close the public hearing for this case. And can I get a motion on this case?
I move the Planning Commission enter a finding that the requested conditional use permit for the property located at the northeast corner of Quebec Street and East 74th Place contained in case CUP 23-0003 meets the criteria of the Land Development Code with conditions, and based upon such finding, recommend that the City Council approve the conditional use permit with the following conditions. South Adams County Water and Sewer Sanitation District shall cause the property to be established as a legal parcel, either through subdivision or through a warranty deed as provided in the Land Development Code, Section 21-6100, 2C. The applicant shall provide a copy of the warranty deed to the city. Landscaping required per the LDC, Article 7 Division 5, including a minimum of 20 trees and 91 shrubs, shall be provided and concentrated on the west side of the subject property to provide additional buffer to existing Quebec Street and neighboring properties. Commercial vehicles more than 2 axles shall not enter or exit through the access from Quebec Street on the west side of the property. A drainage easement over the proposed storm water retention area shall be dedicated at the time of the final plat of the property.
Do we have a second? Are there any
I do have a-
discussion items to this motion?
I have a question about what I said. Maybe for the attorney. Should there be timelines put on how soon those things happen, especially like the drainage easement as an example?
I don't really see the need for any sort of deadline for any of those items to occur. My recollection is that there was a condition in the zoning that had a deadline in it that really would be the trigger for the whole project to move forward. And given these conditions, there's really no need to push steps forward in an untimely manner or in a way that's just not efficient for the ongoing process. And I just don't see any rational connection between a deadline on any of these items and the approval criteria that would necessitate that.
Thank you.
Any other comment? I only have one point, and it's just about the specificity of the landscaping requirement and the, just to the pointed of just the specificity to the count of trees and shrubs. And there was a point made by the applicant that there will be ongoing negotiations with the neighbors. Mr. Hayter, how would that be captured as part of this motion? As that was advised or brought up by the applicant?
I don't really quite understand your question. I know that the condition as proposed includes, it says a minimum of 20 trees and 91 shrubs. I don't know where those numbers came from. And although you've kind of closed the hearing here, you have a motion and a second pending. I don't typically recommend reopening the hearing to get additional information there, but it sounds like it's really the planning staff that could answer that question.
Sure. My question would be just if it needs to be augmented from the specificity that's laid out in saying that it will be some term of some negotiated recourse with the neighbors relative to, because it's a means to mitigate sound is what it sounds like, and to augment that point.
I would only indicate, I don't really know how to address it. I would just add that the condition is a minimum, and it sounds like, given the applicant's ongoing planned meetings with the neighborhood, that they may possibly be taking additional actions to mitigate what sounds like, no pun intended, what sounds like a small amount of noise that would be created here. But I think given the language that they've presented as minimums, there's definitely room for them to be more expansive. And it's, maybe between now and a review by City Council, there could be some more specifics set forth. But I don't think I have any other way to address that.
Understood. I understand. Thank you for the point. Any other discussion? We have a motion by Commissioner Comack and a second by Commissioner Ingleson. Let's open electronic voting. There are 4 yeses, 0 noes, and 0 abstains. So the motion passes. Congratulations to the applicant. I will now ask the Deputy City Attorney to please announce the next case.
The second case on your agenda this evening is Z-990-23 Galloway and Company, Inc. is requesting a zone change from AG Agricultural and I-1 Light Intensity Industrial to I-2 Medium Intensity Industrial for the property located at 6601 Colorado Boulevard, consisting of approximately 11.13 acres. Presenting the case on behalf of the city tonight is Dalton Guerra.
Good evening, Chair and Commission. My name is Dalton Guerra. I am a city planner with the Commerce City Planning Division. Tonight we have a rezone located at 6601 Colorado Boulevard for about 11 acres. The zone change will be from AG Agricultural and I-1 Light Intensity Industrial to I-2 Medium Intensity Industrial. The future land use plan is for general industrial. Here's a look at the aerial of the site. You can see the residential to the east and the O'Brien Canal to the west. And another important note is that there are 2 parcels currently, so you can see a smaller square within the larger teal square or odd-shaped parcel in the northeast corner. That's a separate parcel. Here's a look at the current zoning. You can see the northeast square I was referencing earlier is zoned AG Agricultural, and the larger parcel has 2 zonings on it currently, AG and I-1. The proposed zoning, if approved, would turn the entire parcel as a consolidated. There's also a corresponding consolidation plat that would create I-2 for the entire parcel as a whole, all 11 acres. Here's a look at the future land use plan calling for general industrial. A little history on the site. It's been zoned AG since it was incorporated into the city. In 2016, a portion of the lot was rezoned to I-1. That's the reason for that odd-shaped portion of I-1 on the property. And a corresponding subdivision plat was withdrawn by the applicant at the time that zoning was approved, and thus the current state of the zoning for this property exists. Just a quick reminder on what zoning is. Basically, zoning it determines what uses are allowed and not allowed for a property. It does not determine what user will occupy that property at the end, but it does dictate what uses are allowed and prohibited. All that to say that the requested zoning of I-2, the intent of it is to allow for a warehouse or distribution use with outdoor storage. Further, the applicant is Galloway and Company. They're proposing a 30,000 square foot warehouse building, no end user specified at this moment, and there will be outdoor storage as well. And currently being processed is a development plan for said proposed warehouse building and related site improvements, as well as a subdivision plat to consolidate those 2 lots into one. A neighborhood meeting was conducted on September 8th of 2023. There were 14 members in attendance. Some points brought up by the public were industrial uses in proximity to that neighborhood to the east, increased truck traffic on Colorado Boulevard, as well as the outdoor storage. And the proposed development plan that's currently under review does include landscaping and fencing and other site improvements. To date, staff has received 4 emails regarding the rezone. 3 of them were just general inquiries about the request, and 1 was actually in support of the request from a neighboring property owner. The project was reviewed by a number of agencies. There were no comments or objections to the proposed rezone. and thus there is sufficient evidence in the record to demonstrate that the rezoning will meet the approval criteria as stated in the Land Development Code. A couple considerations. Rezoning to I-2 would be consistent with the comprehensive plan. It would correct the split zoning on the current property. It would allow an industrial use to come onto this property with outdoor storage. And the existing residential homes are located in the vicinity. Some of them are zoned residential and some of them are actually zoned industrial. Here's a look at the approval criteria. We can go into detail on any of these if you would like, but this is just a look at each approval criteria for a rezone. And that is the conclusion of my presentation. Staff can answer any questions, and the applicant is also here to answer any questions and also provide a brief presentation.
Do commissioners have any questions for staff at this time? All right. Please state your name and thank you.
Hi, Aaron McLean with Galloway and Company. Address is 5500 Greenwood Plaza Boulevard, Suite 200, Greenwood Village, Colorado 80111. We're here representing the owner and developer of the property, 6601 Colorado Holdings LLC. His name is Mike Miller. He's in the audience with us today and here to answer any questions as well as is his broker, Ryan Searley. Part of our presentation is really just kind of a video presentation we'd like to present here. Appreciate working with staff and Dalton's guidance throughout the process. And like I say, we accept the findings and support thereof the zoning report and appreciate everything that we've gone through here with the staff. And without further intro, here's this report.
This is 6601 Colorado Boulevard, Commerce City, Colorado. According to the Commerce City Master Plan, the future land use for 6601 Colorado Boulevard is shown as general industrial, marked in purple on this future land use plan, which includes 6601 Colorado Boulevard. Adjacent properties are zoned almost entirely as I-2 and I-3. This entire area is largely industrial. Here's a plat showing the adjacent zoning. Among other industries, our neighbors include Rocky Mountain Metal Recyclers, a huge scrapyard on the rail line, AmeriGas Propane, Brennan Aggregates, with its pile of asphalt and concrete, Jalisco International Road Construction, Semi-Stow, semi-truck storage, and Suncor Refinery, the largest refinery in the state, processing 4 million gallons of crude per day. 6601 Colorado Boulevard was a pig farm for 100 years, predating the existence of Commerce City. This is why the site is currently zoned as agricultural, with the portion abutting Colorado Boulevard zoned as I-1. It has not been used for agricultural purposes since it was sold in 2016 to Nuanez King LLC, owned by Jeannie Nuanez King and her brother Rick Nuanez. After the pig farm owners sold to Nuanez King, the site had its first industrial use as a non-permitted outdoor vehicle storage lot. This use was not an agricultural enterprise. Zoning as agricultural limits the site's utility and value. The flag-shaped footprint and being fully surrounded by industrial sites makes industrial use logical. There is little doubt that industrial is the highest and best use of the land. And it fits with the Commerce City Master Plan. All of the area in purple is planned to be general industrial. 6601 Colorado Holding LLC bought this land 2 years ago with the express intent of zoning the property I-2 to conform to the city's master plan. This change is consistent with and implements recommendations and goals set out in Commerce City Comprehensive Plan and the Commerce City Economic Development Strategic Plan, including future land use for this site and surrounding area. As general industrial, to expand the current industrial base and support long-term economic growth, increase economic and employment opportunities, especially in targeted industries such as logistics and distribution, and provide positive development to attract much-needed investment in the area. Successful rezoning would allow for development and productive use of the currently largely vacant, underutilized land, and then build a warehouse with office space totaling 32,000 square feet. Every aspect of the proposed development has been thoroughly planned. For the past 2 years, we have worked with Commerce City and all third-party government agencies, such as Fire Department and Stormwater, as well as Galloway Engineering, to produce a comprehensive development plan. We have engineered everything per the city's guidelines to streamline obtaining a building permit. Our plan leaves 7 acres of yard space behind the warehouse. This space would be completely shielded from view of traffic on Colorado Boulevard as a result of the landscape and tall fencing. This plan will improve safety, access, and connectivity, and encourage general cleanup and investment in the area by providing an on-site sidewalk network. We have letters of support for this zoning change from almost all offsetting neighbors, including Suncor, a publicly traded company. What was once a pig farm became a non-conforming parking lot. Our plan is to take this site to the next level. The zoning change we request is reasonable, logical, and will provide good, sustainable jobs while increasing revenue for the city. These positive changes will improve community perception of the area and improve public infrastructure. Our substantial capital investment will increase property taxes for the city from its lowest tax rate to its highest. We are ready to proceed with our vision, roll up our sleeves, and get to work. What do you say, Commerce City? Are you ready to put lipstick on this pig?
Thank you for the presentation. And do the commissioners have any follow-up questions from the presentation?
This isn't a question, but I'd just like to point out that his documentation on meeting the comprehensive plan, there referenced a plan that is not yet in force, although the one that was the 10-year plan that was adopted 14 years ago, I think remains the same in terms of the direction for this type of zoning and this type of use. You might point that out to applicants in the future from a planning department standpoint.
Any other questions? Do any members of the public wish to provide comment on this case?
There is no virtual members of the public wishing to speak on this item.
All right. Are there any further discussion items? At this time, I will close the public hearing for this case. Can I get a motion?
I move that the Planning Commission enter a finding that the requested zone change for the property located at 6601 Colorado Boulevard, contained in case Z99023, meets the criteria of the Land Development Code, and based upon such a finding, recommend that the City Council approve the zone change.
Second.
We have a motion by Commissioner Van Dyke and a second by Commissioner Comack. Let's open electronic voting. There are 4 yeses, 0 nos, and 0 abstains. The motion passes. Congratulations to the applicant. This will close the public hearings for tonight. The commission will now hear some presentations, starting with the presentation from the city manager's office on the cost of growth.
That'll be a virtual presentation. We'll
And
bring
are they
the
available?
speaker up.
Hi, good evening. Can you hear me?
Yes, yes, we can.
Great. I'm Brian Duffany with Economic and Planning Systems. And I don't know, is John Borgelli in the room? Was he going to give a little overview? Or should I just get right into it?
John is not here. I think you can just go ahead and start on your own, sir.
Okay, I've got my slide deck here, and I'll just put it up on the screen. Just give me one moment. And great, thank you for the flexibility to do this remotely this evening. So again, Brian Duffany, Economic and Planning Systems. I'm a principal here. I'm in downtown Denver. I have about 20 years of experience in consulting on the economics of city planning. And this is a study that the City Council had asked for about a year ago or so, and we've been working with staff on this for about 8 months or so, and we presented this to the council in December, and they asked that we also bring it to Planning Commission, and then we're going to go back to council again, I think in March, because there were some new members that they thought would also benefit from this. So this is purely informational. The purpose of this. Purpose of a cost of growth study is to look at, how the city's cost and revenue structure, taxes and the services it provides, affects the fiscal balance of the city. It's really answering the question, does new development pay its way? And so this type of information helps policymakers like you understand the city's budget and how the cost structure works, and how land use affects the city's financial position. So we do that there's two major things that we did here. We've developed a fiscal impact model, which is just a big Excel calculator that looks at the ongoing revenues and costs of new development. And you simply estimate the revenues, you estimate the costs, and the difference, you either get a positive or a negative number, which is the net fiscal impact. And so that looks at the general fund, looks at the ongoing annual operating impacts. And then the other piece of this is capital costs. Those are more of a one-time impact or a more regular impact. And they're funded out of the city's capital improvement planning program. And so we took a really detailed look at a couple CIP cycles, have some findings from that. I'll cover some recommendations that came out of the study, and then we've got time for questions. I have about 10 slides, and I'll try to move through at a reasonable pace, and we'll should have plenty of time for questions at the end. So here's sort of the answer on the operating side, and this is really not a surprise. So residential does have a negative fiscal impact in Commerce City. Round numbers, a new single family home costs the city net about $900 per unit. A new multifamily home costs the city net $400 to $450 per unit. That is not unique to Commerce City. I really want to emphasize that. That's a pattern that we see throughout Colorado. And it's driven by a couple things. I'm getting ahead of myself. It's driven by sales tax generation from non-residential development and the Gallagher Amendment of impacts on how property tax is calculated. So non-residential development is assessed at about 3.5 times the rate of residential for the same amount of market value. So does this mean that all cities in Colorado should stop allowing residential development? I also do a lot of housing policy work, and I don't think that's the answer. I think that what this means is that local governments have to work within this framework and have other strategies to balance out their revenues. And a lot of times the revenues balance out with non-residential development. They make up the gap. And so you have to think about fiscal impacts citywide. If you just look at an individual residential development, it's more than likely going to be negative. And that's just sort of the reality. But when you consider fiscal impact on a citywide level or for larger areas of the city, the hope is that you can get a balance of land uses that will generate enough revenue to be neutral or positive. And so here you see that retail development, in terms of fiscal impact, that's where it is. So like anchor retail, a major retailer like a Target, like a Costco, something like that, those are going to generate, these numbers are per 1,000 square foot. This example that we modeled here generates $14,000 per year per 1,000 square feet. So, over $10 a square foot in net fiscal impact positive for retail development. Grocery has a positive fiscal impact, but not quite as strong. Groceries aren't taxed in most communities, including Commerce City. They're just, things that are subject to sales tax, or things like prescription, food for home consumption, and general merchandise. Office might be a little bit surprising. Office development is, I would just call it kind of fiscally neutral. Not a major bump in terms of fiscal impact from office development, and that's also a pattern that we see in most places. And then industrial is highly variable. Here in this example, it comes out slightly on the positive side. Some industrial development has a lot of high-value personal property, machinery, automation systems, things like that are owners pay business personal property tax on it. So that can generate more revenue as well. And in Commerce City, I think there's a lot of industrial space that's also generating sales tax, especially areas that sell building materials. Let's see. So that's sort of the answer on the operating side. Residential negative, non-residential generally positive, and the goal is to get them to balance out at a citywide level. Okay, now on to the capital project impacts. The city's capital improvement planning program divides projects into three categories. There's preventative maintenance. I think that's sort of routine maintenance. Periodic maintenance, those are sort of special projects and major capital maintenance projects. And then capital improvement projects, which I've labeled here capital expansion projects. That's the focus of this as a cost of growth study. So a capital expansion project is new infrastructure, new facilities, new roads, extending roads, widening roads, new storm drainage infrastructure, new parks, new recreation facilities, things that are needed to serve a growing community. And so looking at, pardon me, my screen, I've got a little bit of a glitchy monitor. Sorry about that. Anyway, so we looked at how the city pays for these capital expansion programs over two CIP cycles. I think the most notable finding that we had was the importance of the 2K sales tax bond. That in the last CIP cycle, 2019 through 2023, that funded almost half of the capital expansion projects. And then you can see that the general fund had very little was required to be transferred in from the general fund. And that's important because a general fund transfer, especially when you're talking about growth-related projects, that's a bit of a subsidy of existing residents and businesses paying for growth-serving projects. It's not 100% purely true, but a lot of the general fund is coming from more existing residents and development than new. So in a perfect world, a city would have enough dedicated revenues to be able to fund 100% of its growth-related projects, and that's just not the reality in projects in Colorado. Many communities need to supplement their capital revenues with general fund transfers. Just that it's something to be wary of to try to minimize that. So, get into recommendations. A couple of caveats. Most of what I'm going to talk about applies only to new development, so it doesn't address sort of the larger fiscal structure of the city. There is still, though, a lot of undeveloped and unannexed land in your comprehensive plan boundaries. So it's important to get good growth policies established for the long term, right? These are 10, 20, multi-decade plans. So the policies that you have in place now will have effects far in the future. we've got two categories of options. Right? It's not rocket science. You either got to increase revenues or reduce your costs. And in this context, it's ensuring that development is providing what it needs to provide and paying its fair share. Realistically and politically, there are limited options that are to increase revenues. Tax increases require voter approval. They're often controversial and need to be done very strategically. Okay. So another preface, a lot happened. Commerce City was busy in 2023. A lot of new policies were adopted while we were working on this study, and they turned out to be recommendations that we would have likely made anyway. So, maybe it made our job a little easier. Good work, I guess. So on the 2K sales tax bond, again, that's a really important financing source, and a lot of that bond proceed has been spent down. But as the sales tax revenue grows, and as there's a room to issue more bond debt, we think that is a good strategy for funding capital projects. So I live in Denver, and every couple of ballots, you see the language: without raising taxes, shall the city allocate X million dollars to finance, X amount of money for projects A, B, and C. So, that's something you would continue to do, every few years as the money's available. The city also adopted new impact fees in 2023. That was a really big step forward, we think. The city's impact fees had been in place for a long time, and they hadn't been updated. They were far below what surrounding communities charge, and were not anywhere near close to recovering the full cost of growth. So if you don't know, impact fees are fees charged at building permit on new development to pay for capital projects. And you do a nexus study that establishes the fee level, and the study establishes the full cost recovery amount, and then the city council has the option of adopting something up to that. And so that was done just last year, and is in place now. The city also updated a lot of user fees, or is in the process of updating some of those. Other things like building permit fees and other charges for services. It's also important to ensure that those are recovering the appropriate amount of cost. Some things it's appropriate also to subsidize, things like recreation, where you want to ensure that people of lower income still have access to those types of services. And then last was the regional improvement mill levy for metro districts. That was, I think it passed in December. That requires, well, I think you have to be careful with I'm not a lawyer, but it's a provision in the city's service district that asks for service plans that asks for 5 mills for 4 years on residential districts, 1.5 for commercial districts, and 10 mills for industrial districts. City of Aurora, I think, was the first city in the state to have that. Fort Collins also has a very similar policy, and those funds go to the city, which supplements the CIP, and they can use to fund capital projects. Because a lot of times what happens is Project A will build all of its internal infrastructure and maybe improve a bit of an arterial road, and then another project over here will do the same thing, and no one's connecting the gap. And I think there are a lot of road projects in Commerce City that are doing that now. So this is additional funding to help address those citywide regional impact, regional infrastructure needs. Okay, I think I got one or two more. These two are new revenue options. New revenues are always potentially controversial, but these are ideas. One is a transportation utility fee. So this would be a new fee. It would apply to all development, existing and new. As a fee, it can be implemented through an ordinance. It's based on the amount of lot frontage and the land use type that relates to how many trips it generates and how the impacts on the roads are. Funds have to be restricted to street maintenance as a fee. So the only city in Colorado that has one is Loveland. It's about $3 a month per home. They add it to the utility bills, and it's paid with that. For them, it generates just under $4 million a year. You're a larger community and would probably bring in more money. The other one, I'll just say it, is to charge for trash collection. That's something that came up in discussions. That's a service the city has provided for free for many years, but the costs are going up. It's now about $4 million a year for the city. A lot of surrounding communities also charge for this. Denver, Thornton, North Glen all charge. There are likely many other examples of that, and I think Brighton is going through a process right now to consider that as well. And last thing, this is a little bigger picture. There's a really close relationship between tax base, land use, and economic development. And so one of the things we found here was that part of the reason residential was negative is because a lot of the household spending in Commerce City leaves the city. You know, there's so much retail competition around your boundaries, and the city so far hasn't been able to develop a really large retail sales tax base. Right, you've got Northfield just to the south of you, the whole I-25 corridor to your west, and then Brighton has been pretty successful attracting retail to your north. And so I think I don't remember the percentages, but a fair amount of people spending in Commerce City is going to other places. So you're not getting the sales tax from your residents. So one of the economic development strategy, and I believe the city manager's office is also working on this, and it may come up also in your code update. I think they're next on the agenda, maybe not in this meeting, but eventually is trying to optimize your retail mix. And so it's a bit of an economic development strategy and a land use strategy. I do want to offer some words of caution with that, because just because you zone something doesn't mean you will get it. Retail is very, very competitive. You know, unless you've been living under a rock and don't shop on Amazon, you realize how difficult it is to compete in the retail these days. There are just far fewer retailers out there in the market expanding. So just being realistic about attracting and recruiting retail and being strategic with any types of incentives. And then last was just periodically, we didn't find any real low-hanging fruit in this study talking with staff, but just periodically looking at your regulations and ensuring that development is providing what it needs to provide, especially things like direct transportation access improvements to projects. There should be a pretty clear line between what impact fees pay for and what the developer is responsible for. So typically, this is all case by case, so just be careful with generalizations, but typically impact fees are projects of citywide benefit, not things like direct access improvements that the developer needs to do to make their project, like a intersection improvement, a right turn lane, things like that. And then last, water and wastewater policy. In the fall, when we were framing up these recommendations, there were discussions going on with South Adams Water and Sanitation District. I know they may be in the room as well, where there were cases where my understanding is there were cases where the city was being asked to contribute financially to infrastructure extensions for new development. The draft policies that are being talked about right now make it clear that those are developer costs, and they lay out a number of options for different types of financing districts that developers can use and that the city will help with in terms of formation to finance that infrastructure. And so just ongoing coordination and collaboration with the district, especially ensuring that infrastructure is sequenced logically and you're avoiding leapfrog development. Not extending infrastructure to areas where there isn't much development yet and waiting for it to backfill. It's typically not a cost-effective way to grow. So thank you. I'm happy to take any questions or thoughts.
Thank you, Mr. Duffany. Do any of the commissioners have any questions for staff or Mr. Duffany? I see a lot of no head shaking. So, yeah, Mr. Duffany, thank you for your time, and we appreciate the presentation.
Thank you very much. Have a good evening.
And we do have one final presentation, but I just want to poll the commissioners. Do we need a break, or are we okay to proceed with the next presentation? All right. The next and final presentation for this evening will be about Land Development Code Update presentation by the consultant Kendall Keast Collaborative. Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much, Commissioners. Brian Mabry with Kendall Keast Collaborative. With me is Marcia Boyle, and we're going to walk you through and give you a preview and highlights from what we call Module 1 of the Land Development Code Update. Yeah. Oh, I'm sorry. Yep. Mic's on now. We're still in the early stages of this project, I think. And just a reminder that anything we talk about is still in draft form. Anything can change until it's adopted, and then even after it's adopted, it can change through the right processes, as you all know. So that's where we are. So we'll just get going. Module 1, there's 4 modules in this overall project. But Module 1 is the first 3 articles of the draft Land Development Code. Those have to do with general provisions, zoning districts, and development standards. And by development standards, we mean setbacks and building heights and densities, and use standards, so permitted and what we call limited use in this draft, and conditional use and those types of things. Then we'll have a very short slide on what we are kind of looking forward to in the future of this project. So several goals, 6 of them are on the screen here. Modernizing the development code so that it's a contemporary document, implementing your comprehensive plan, which we understand and know that is not adopted yet. We hope it will be. Much of the draft, especially related to the proposed zoning districts, is kind of predicated on that comprehensive plan. If it's not adopted, we'll reassess what we're doing, but this draft has that language in it that is based on what we see as the draft comprehensive plan. Organizing the regulations in a logical manner, standards with standards, procedures with procedures, definitions all together at the end, that type of thing. That's just sort of a modern best practice with development codes like this. Having standards that achieve quality development. And what's quality development? Well, that can sometimes be in the eye of the beholder, but it's generally what the comprehensive plan recommends as far as landscaping or connectivity or other things like that. Streamlining review procedures as much as we can. There are some things we can't streamline that have to go through public hearings and public processes, but where we can do it and where you all and where the council is comfortable with, delegating authority to staff to make decisions based on clear, objective standards, then we like to do that. And then having a user-friendly code that's modern and contemporary. So we always like to remind everyone, especially if this is being watched, online or on TV by laypersons, kind of what a land development code can provide and what it can't provide in a subsequent slide. Land development codes kind of group together a lot of your development regulations and procedures, so zoning districts, land uses, how land subdivision standards and subdivision procedures, building design, site design, which would include landscaping and signs and parking, that sets up certain review bodies like you all and like the Board of Adjustment and others that have review authority and decision-making authority, handles nonconformities or grandfathering, how gets into enforcement and penalties and violations, and then also includes definitions. Really, for Module 1, what we're looking at is really that first check mark on that list today. So just some, again, reminders and clarifications about what a land development code doesn't provide or can't provide. It doesn't set a property tax policy or set any kind of tax rate or assess a value on any certain property within the city. The previous Brian mentioned impact fees. It doesn't cover impact fees either. It's not a capital improvements program, so it doesn't set a schedule or a budget for public improvements that the city is undertaking. It's not the building code, so it doesn't have to do with the safety and structural soundness of buildings, but it can, as mentioned, have standards for the exterior of buildings, but not standards about the numbers of bathrooms that have to go in or how wiring is done or things of that nature. And then finally, it's not construction standards, which are typically more overseen by the Public Works and Engineering Department of a city, where it has standards for manholes and curbs and gutters and things of that nature. Overall, this land development code is being organized sort of in the order that it's most frequently and popularly used and by what citizens want to know, and helps them to find answers. So up front in the document is the zoning districts and the land uses, so helping to answer along with the zoning map, how is my land zoned? Then it gets into, what can I build by going into the land uses and standards that go along with it. How big can I build it? So setbacks and building heights. How high can something like a fence be? So down into the details there, can I put my shed there? Those kind of things. In the end, we hope that this document is user-friendly enough and technologically savvy enough that it helps take some of the burden off staff for answering these questions that come through email or through phone calls that are, for them, they could answer them in their sleep, but we want to have it so that the document's understandable and that a layperson can look to find the answer as realistically as possible. So just to distinguish this project from the comprehensive plan, think of it sort of as a menu versus a recipe, or a menu versus a cookbook. The menu is the comprehensive plan. The recipe is the land development code. Menu shows things you could order at a restaurant. It shows options and possibilities, while the land development code is more precise and as a how-to guide on how to make the comprehensive plan a reality. So that's kind of a handy dividing line there. Getting into the content of the articles that make up Module 1, general provisions is the shortest, and if you reading through that, you might feel like you've accomplished something. You read a whole article, but it's rather short. It's definitely the shortest of the articles in the document. Mostly the same as far as the wording. When you do get the draft, the actual drafted language in your hands, you'll see pretty extensive use of redlining and track changes and showing what's proposed to be stricken versus what's proposed to be added, just so you're clear on what is changing, and so everyone who's looking at it is clear on what's changing. We've done some wording and kind of legalese cleanup on the wording as well. There's some severability provisions that probably may have been in there already, but we didn't see them, so we added it back in. Put in when the thing is going to be effective, which we don't know yet, so that's kind of a placeholder. There's also in there some transitional provisions and vested rights provisions for when someone has a project that has been approved or is under review, and then the new LDC gets adopted. We don't want them to be sort of in limbo between the old code and the new, so laying out those kinds of criteria as well. Getting into Article 2, zoning districts and development standards. So again, we're basing these proposed zoning districts off of the draft comprehensive plan character areas. Those are part of a big part of the comprehensive plan. They show not as a zoning map, but as sort of a character map, different parts of the city and how those areas are projected to grow and what kinds of character they're supposed to have. Character being a combination of like land uses and building positions and lot sizes and amounts of greenery versus amounts of paved area and those kind of things. There's development standards for each zoning district, and then different building types that are permitted within each zoning district. So here I've got two tables that are key parts of Article 2. This one on the left lists the different residential districts, and then provides some what we call development options or lot names within each district, so that a person can, for example, in the, I'll go with the RE, the Rural Estate District, the second one from the top, There are several different options and amounts of open space that could be set aside, and those are related to the amounts of density or units, dwelling units or lots per acre that that development could get. So basically, the more open space that gets set aside, there's some incentive there by having a little bit more density that's allowed than if you'd set aside less open space. So that gets kind of complicated, but the regulations flesh all that out. Of course, I'm only able to show highlights of the document. There are, on the right, what I mentioned, the building types. So single-family detached, single-family attached, which would be like a 2-unit townhouse, modular homes, townhouses, several other housing types, and where those are allowed in those residential districts. Those are sort of like land uses, but a little different in that there's rules about, especially for something like a townhouse, there's a 0-foot setback on one side because it's a common wall between the 2 units. Then the other side might have whatever the number is, a certain setback on the side. All kinds of standards for each of these building types are provided and fleshed out in the draft. This is a view of one of the zoning district pages. It gives, as I mentioned, kind of in that RE district, the 3 development options. Those are sort of schematic and sketched out just to give an idea of what we're talking about by, this auto urban residential versus urban core residential versus urban residential there. What the outcomes would roughly look like, and these are obviously just graphics, but giving an idea of what to expect from each of the districts. There at the bottom, there's just reminders, to the reader that there are other rules that apply, not just what's on this page related to design standards and building types and floodplain and parking and a bunch of other things. This is pretty much the same thing as I showed before for residential, but this is non-residential. And as you can see, there's some placeholder graphics there on the bottom half of the table on the left, but we are working on those, and those will, of course, be in place as we keep working on this. Pretty much the same story. The districts are spelled out there, and then on the right are the different non-residential development types. So a mixed-use building, commercial building, light industrial, parking structure, and the like. This is an excerpt or a view of what the more detailed look at the building type regulations. We've got some general provisions and a description there on the left, and of course an illustration, highly modern way beyond, your current regulations when they were written originally were probably, ahead of their time and cutting edge, and we're trying to bring that forward to 2024 and have them, even better. So these excerpts just show how we have there on the right different measurements, and they're sort of keyed into each of those illustrations on top. Like A is lot area, and there's an A on the drawing that shows what we mean by lot area, or G is front setback, and so the G on that illustration shows exactly what we mean by front setback in this case. One more thing, and this, for my part at least, this is sort of a Module 1 and a Module 2 topic, which is open or amenity space. So within the draft, there are, in the residential districts especially, there are options to have conventional development and conservation development. Conservation is that variety where you've set aside more open area or more amenity space, and therefore getting that bonus of more lots per acre. So a lot of times in a more suburban setting for amenity space or open space, you think of like natural areas or parks or greenways. But in a redevelopment scenario or infill or a more urbanized scenario, that might not work. It might not be possible to have a green belt in a more urbanized development. So there are other options now in this draft that allow a development to have like a plaza or a square that's more hardscaped and not complete. It's got some greenery, but it's not like it is a greenway, or it's not like it's a natural area. There's also incentives for increased stormwater management or enhanced stormwater management, or enhanced parking lot landscaping, those can be brought in to a design and get credit for open space or amenity space, basically. So those tie into the districts, and then Module 2 has a little more detail. And Module 2, staff hasn't even really started reviewing yet, so it's in its very early stages as well. So that's a view for the first 2 articles, and now Marcia is going to keep going with Article 3.
Good evening. All right, so Article 3 is the third and final article for Module 1, and we wanted to just point out a few of the key changes and new features for land uses, which is what Article 3 addresses. So the first is that we've introduced what we call use categories. You can see an example here on the left for the outdoor recreation use category, and I'll show some other examples too as we go through the next few slides. But essentially, using these use categories allows us to shorten the land use matrix. It also allows us to group uses that have similar impacts on adjacent properties and to make sure that we're treating those uses the same. So if we list them all, every single individual use anybody could ever think of in the land use matrix as an individual line, there's a higher likelihood that we'll treat uses differently that really should be treated in the same way. So this helps prevent that from happening. And it also allows us to provide some more detail. You can see here that we've got primary uses listed in the left-hand column of this table, accessory uses that you'd likely see associated with those in the middle column. And then there might be uses that someone may think, well, this is related to outdoor recreation. Why am I not seeing it here? And so that uses not included column gives us the opportunity to say, if you're not seeing it here, check in one or more other use categories. So that's sort of the setup here. You can also see at the very bottom on the left, it says that other uses meeting the characteristics of that particular use category also fit within it. We know that today we can list out all the uses that we're all familiar with, but in 2 years or 5 years or 10 years, there's going to be new creative uses that we don't know about today. So this allows some flexibility in making sure that you don't have to amend the LDC just because there's a new use that has come up. So that's in there just for some safety. There's characteristics listed at the top that gives sort of a definition of what you'd look for in this use category. So that will help with the interpretation there if there's question about it. So this is kind of what it looks like for how it's applied in the land use matrix. You can see on the left that this table is just one snippet of the land use matrix showing the commercial uses. The use categories are in the far left column. So we were just on that outdoor recreation use category. You can see for this particular one, it just occupies one row in the land use matrix because we thought everything fits within that category, and there's no specific standards that should be called out for any specific uses related to that. You can see in other use categories on this, in this part of the table, that there are other uses that may not fit just within that use category. So for overnight accommodations, for instance, you can see short-term rental or bed and breakfast have been called out. In this particular part of the land use matrix, they're prohibited just because of the type of use we're talking about, but in another land use matrix, they'll be permitted or will have some limited or conditional uses that correspond with them. So that's just why you're seeing prohibited across that row right now. But anything else that falls within that overnight accommodations use category will fit within the all overnight accommodation uses not included. So that's sort of how the land use matrix and the use categories work together. And they'll be linked back and forth. So if someone's not sure what use category they should be relying on, they can click that to go back and forth to those other tables.
I have a question about.
Sure.
There's two things that my friends and neighbors, I actually have a friend or two, but they bring these things up, and one of them in particular is a kind of a hot potato right now. The first thing is I didn't see dog parks in there. And I think there's a need for dog parks in the north end of our community, or a dog park at least. And it's valuable enough that our our build to rent communities oftentimes have their own dog parks.
Sure.
I don't know how they get through the land development code, but nevertheless, they're there. So I think, just as a point of reference, I think that dog parks should be part of that.
Yeah.
The second thing is pickleball courts, and I'm sure you've probably heard that before. That's a hot enough potato that Boulder has just spent a lot of money with a consultant that's using national, I don't know if you're involved or if you know of it, but they're spending big bucks on some advisors that are using statistics that some people don't feel are appropriate. And it's not often, unless you're looking at gun clubs, where noise is also a significant part of outdoor entertainment.
Sure.
And, Denver's having some problems with some of that. They've closed some parks and so on and so forth.
Yeah.
And those are things that I think are important that,
Yeah.
And I don't know, we're in the process of not only reviewing and making a recommendation for the comprehensive plan, but we're in the process of having some outside people help us understand exactly what we think we should put in there and how to operate it. I'd love to perhaps contact one of the two of you here at some point to get some input on that. But the important thing is, in other comp plans and other things that you've worked with, do you see that much detail in a comp plan or not, or is it all over the ballpark? What's your input on that?
Well, I'd say so dog parks and pickleball courts are the kind of two key uses you're hitting on here. These slides are just showing a sample of what you'll
Examples,
see.
sure.
Yeah, and so I think we'll need to check for sure. Dog parks, I believe, may have shown up in a different category. It might be like open use or public use or something like that. So we'll double check to see if those are in there. And they may or may not have some associated standards with them. I don't remember about pickleball facilities. Obviously, that's a trending sort of use nationwide, as you said. So we can talk about if there are standards that we'd want to associate with them, or if they'd fit, say, within that outdoor activity item about halfway through that bullet list on the primary uses. We can talk about that as we move
It's
forward.
not a tennis court.
Oh, no, I play both,
tennis players in
don't worry.
Boulder actually have a lawsuit against the city
Yeah.
because some people are using their courts as pickleball courts, so
Yeah.
just,
Oh, no, I understand that. I play both of those sports, so I know they
too.
have different requirements. But yeah, we can look into both of those to make sure that they're in here somewhere. And like we said, this, the primary uses in each of the use category tables are sort of the starting point based on what you have in your current LDC, based on uses that we've encountered. But we know that there are more and more uses that could be added. So we can accommodate for as many of those as possible. But again, know that maybe in 10 years, it won't be pickleball, it'll be some other racket sport that's the new thing. So we'll do what we can to accommodate as many of those as possible. So the other piece, or another big piece of the use regulations is talking about if they are permitted by right or if they require additional approval. I don't know why our font is messed up there, so apologies for that, but wanted to show you on the left the existing structure that you have and how it now compares to the proposed structure on the right. You still have by right uses. You'll see in a minute that those show up as a P in your land use matrix. Those have not changed. The one thing that has changed with those is that in your current LDC, sometimes those by right uses have associated standards. In the new LDC, or in the proposed LDC, we're saying that those are just permitted by right. They don't have associated standards. If it says P, you can go ahead and do that if you're in the right zoning district and follow all the other regulations. What we do have now, instead of use by permit, is what we're calling limited uses. Those do have standards associated with them, but they're structured in a way that can be administratively approved so that there's a list of however many standards. If you follow those standards, then staff could approve them during your other review. The conditional uses, which retains the same name, are the ones that would require public hearing. So those will always have standards. We've tried to clarify now that limited and conditional uses have associated standards, by right uses do not. So there's a little bit of confusion in the current LDC that standards are sometimes associated with conditional or use by permit and sometimes not. So we've tried to clarify that a little bit and can continue making sure that's as clear as possible as we move forward. But this is how it'll look in your land use matrix. It's the same excerpt from before, but just a little bit less stuff on the screen to show you. You've got your Ps, your Ls that should have associated standards that are in that far right column. And again, in the online version, that will be a link so you can easily navigate to those standards to see what you're required to do. Same for the conditional uses that show up as well. And then anything that's prohibited will have the dash line through it. If you do have standards you have to comply with for limited or conditional uses, this is the sort of page you'll see if you navigate to those standards. Brian mentioned before that we're trying to be very diligent about using track changes. So anything you see in blue here is either edited from your existing or it's new text. So the middle one, for example, the artisan handcrafted manufacturing use is all new text because it's all blue and there's no strike-throughs. The other ones are edited and some new stuff added in for clarity. So when you see the draft, you'll see a lot of this. We know it's sometimes a little hard to navigate if there's a lot of blue going on, but it'll be cleaned up before it's adopted. So this is just for us to keep track of what's going on. But again, this is just a sample of some use standards that would go along with that use table if you click the link. Also in Article 3 for use regulations, obviously we focused mostly on the land use matrix and the use categories and use standards, but there's also standards for accessory uses, temporary uses, and this is the temporary use table, wireless telecommunications, and then new and unlisted uses. The temporary uses here, we've tried to make a similar table to that of the land use matrix just for consistency. But you can see too that there are callouts for specific standards if there are any, as well as the duration of that temporary use permit, and then where that permit is required and what districts that it's permitted within. And then otherwise, we've sort of cleaned up some of the uses. We talked a little bit today with staff and meetings about some accessory uses and following some state bills that are potentially in the works, and we'll just kind of follow along with those and adjust as needed. But those are all in this particular article as well. So to sort of end this presentation, we wanted to just give you sort of a step-by-step, this is how you'll kind of apply this if you were to come forward with a case, or if you guys were to hear a case. So just showing how all of the pieces sort of tie together. So of course, this is your existing zoning map. It'll be updated as we solidify the proposed zoning districts. First is, of course, to determine what zoning district you're located within. Then to determine which development option or lot name you select for your district. So just as an example here, I-1 has 2 that the applicant could choose from. Then there's, of course, associated lot area, pervious area, open space standards, and other things that go along with that, and then the link to that particular section. So they can choose which direction they're headed. We're not eliminating PUDs as of right now, but we are trying to make it so that there's more by right options, and there's less reliance on PUDs from the get-go, and people can choose from these tables to figure out how their development fits within this.
Will this be online and searchable?
Yes, it will be. Right now, it's a static document just because it's editable, but on the back end, as we call it, of ENCODE Plus, we're all working with staff on collaborating back and forth on the text. That's why you see all these red lines right now. Eventually, there will be a public review draft that will be on the front end of ENCODE Plus that will be searchable, lots of links, lots of pop-ups, all that, so it should be easier to navigate. The next step would be for someone to go into the land use matrix. Here, of course, it's for the non-residential and mixed use districts, but there's the residential one as well. So they can decide, here's my district. On the top row, here are the uses that I could choose within my district that are permitted, or maybe that have standards associated with them if they're limited or conditional. There's also that permitted building types table that Brian touched on earlier. For this particular district, there are 4 building types that an applicant could select from. And then, of course, the standards associated with them that he showed before. Here's just another sample. I think he showed the mixed use earlier. Here's the commercial sample. We've tried to structure them all very similarly so that if someone printed out standards for each of the individual building types, the headers would be the same, labels would mostly be the same, I think, just to make it as consistent as possible as you navigate. And then this sort of gets into Module 2 again. It's sort of hard to not cross over between the two, but just as a little preview for you, there's an applicability table in Module 2 that shows, based on your project type and what you're proposing, these are the different standards the design standards that you have to comply with. New construction, which is the column that's highlighted, you have to comply with all the design standards. If you get into different sizes of additions, changes in use, some of those things, there may be less of these that you have to comply with. So you can see it addresses building design, parking, landscaping, outdoor display and storage, lighting, signs, and amenity space. So there will be a lot more to come. Yeah.
I do have one question. It's
Sure.
just an overarching thing, and
Yeah.
it's just noted in this,
Sure.
what feedback you're hearing from staff and other stakeholders related to parking minimums and how that is influencing this. That's another hot button
Yeah.
topic, is there's states out there that are moving away from parking minimums. I was just wondering how you are all capturing that.
We haven't gone that far and haven't done maximums, which other communities approach too. If that comes up, we just haven't heard that yet. If it comes up, we can definitely address it. But we've tried to right-size the parking just to be kind of more in line with trends now, which often decreases the amount of parking that's required slightly. We haven't done anything major here, but so far we've heard a little bit more about landscaping and that kind of section of standards, sustainability and those topics. But any of these, of course, are open for discussion. As Brian mentioned, this is part of Module 2. It is drafted, and staff will start reviewing it soon. But of course, it's a draft, so there's plenty of room for input and changes.
Thank you.
And that's perfect, because next steps, so this week we're meeting with lots of staff and stakeholders. We had a full day today, and we have more meetings tomorrow. There's still some polishing to do on Module 1, and then we'll get that into your hands, I believe. We'll have to check with staff just to confirm some of the next steps as far as who's going to review things when. But we continue drafting on our end. Staff continues reviewing on their end, and like I said, it's very collaborative. So as they give us edits, we're making those edits and talking back and forth about different topics within each module. So we continue to draft. We'll be doing the subdivision standards next, and then procedures is the fourth and final module. And here's just our overall timeline. We're in task 4, which is the 4th of 5 tasks, but as you can see, it's a full year and likely a little bit longer than a full year when it truly comes to it. So there's plenty of work to do in this part of the project. And that's all we have for you, but we're happy to take more questions.
Thank you, Brian and Marcia, for your presentation, and I don't believe anybody else has any questions. So yeah, thank you for your presentation. It was very informative.
Will we be able to have both of these presentations, this one and the previous one, sent to us or posted online where we can see them?
Sure, we can send those out. I believe the previous one was included in the packet, but we can include this one as well.
Okay.
We can send this out.
Can I just ask a question real quick? Sorry, Mr. Chair.
Sure.
The work they're doing, and I know you don't have an answer right now, but the work they're doing is based heavily on the comp plan and the draft that's out there. I'm just curious if you're comfortable with what you've seen tonight, if we keep moving forward with this as far as it coordinating with that comprehensive plan, or if your thoughts on the comp plan are widely varied from what was presented last fall. So just so we can kind of give them some direction as we move forward too, if that makes sense, just to get a feel for that.
Well, and I'll have to defer to Commissioner Comack because as Commissioner Amador has moved on, and he was participating in as one of the two members of the planning commission that as we can move now into commission business with this. It's just, I'm not sure what that process is and where that stood.
Well, our resolution 3-4 months ago was that we will not continue working on the comp plan until we get some outside guidance as to primarily how we should be operating, because we haven't operated according to the law and the city code in the past very well. And it's not that we've done wrong stuff, we just haven't done a lot of stuff that we're supposed to be responsible for. And the comp plan is one of them. And then secondly, there are some rather significant areas in the comp plan that I believe will be different than what was presented in the past. And, you know, specifically how to separate some of the problems and some of the solutions between the north end and the core city. And so I don't know that there's really an answer to that question. Where we stand, I don't know. I don't think anybody does. And I know that both the council and the administration are excited to get that done, but my personal view is I want to do it right as opposed to doing it quick. And if we're talking about a 25-year plan, my personal opinion is it needs a little bit more massaging.
Yeah, and I appreciate that. I understand that. I guess the question is as far as the character areas, which a lot of these, I think the codes that we're working on, the zoning codes, are kind of tied in. So if it's a matter of rearranging where those character areas are, kind of, you know what I mean? Or if we're going to change those completely. And I know you can't answer that right now. I'm just trying to get a feel.
Well, some feedback that I've gotten from a couple of council members and a couple other people is the fact that the Northern Range, as an example, is way too large to put it into just a primarily residential area. It needs to have more involvement of other kinds of zones up there. And I support that, but that's, you know, not only my opinion. And secondly, some of the things that were recommended to do that in the final proposal was not changed and not included in that. One of the examples was flex space is not allowed in the Northern Range, as an example. And that's probably a poor decision. And so we've got some work to do. I can't really, I think the work that they're doing on the LDC is fantastic, quite frankly, especially in separating those particular functions away from PUDs so that PUDs are much more limited than they were in the past. You know, I personally support that, you know, tremendously, but I'm not king. We have to come to an agreement among 5 of us here that that's the way to go to present our opinion to the council, to the city council.
And if I,
What I'm hearing is a question about whether or not we anticipate that the actual characters themselves are going to change, or are we just thinking that like what you're talking about, the North
Right.
Range, which you and I have talked about as well, it's not necessarily that those actual like character definitions would change. It may be that that we reevaluate or we recommend a reevaluation of what character exists in some of those areas, because it sounds to me like we want to move. What we'd like to do is be able to move forward with the LDC to further sort of define those individual character areas and be able to do that independent of trying to figure out where those character areas lie, which it makes sense to me unless we're thinking that we might actually come forward with with new character areas.
And so,
Yeah, and I think there's that possibility.
You do,
You
okay.
know, that's,
Yeah.
but that's just my opinion.
Sure.
And some of that, I think, is supported with some of the council people as well. That
if, can
either
I
it needs to be
interject though,
more
because
broad.
we're kind of getting off topic of what we,
It needs
what
to
the,
either be more broad or it needs to be defined differently. And so I don't know, you know, that's,
and this is all really good conversation. As you can see, this
Right.
needs to happen, but it's back to your base question of deviating from those character areas. And now that there's a vacancy from the two people that were appointed by the planning commission, that role, whomever that person is, needs to take Andrew's spot, and then that would inform the path forward. So I don't know what that answer is, but that would be, I think, the first step that needs to happen to continue that effort. Not to railroad, because this effort that they're going through it's very valid and it's very good work, and we wouldn't want to lose the momentum of that and the direction and the input from staff, because there's a lot of money that's being spent for that effort. So I understand your question. I just don't know what the answer is to that.
No, and I'm not looking for a direct answer. I was just trying to get a feel as we move forward here on the land development code.
And I feel that from what we heard tonight and by the acknowledgement and the acceptance of what we're hearing as a board and seeing shaking heads, I feel like we're moving forward in a general direction.
No, that sounds great. That's what I needed, just some feedback. I wasn't looking for a direct, positive yet negative answer.
Perfect.
I understand, so thanks.
All right, since we've kind of already crossed that bridge, is there any other commission business that we need to discuss at this time?
yes, there is. Reuben?
Yes.
A couple months ago, I guess, we elected two people here to be on that committee of three to define that, and I got some feedback, and our previous chairperson, Mr. Amador, was to kind of carry the ball on this, and we've sort of been directed that maybe we should have permanent council members or commissioners as opposed to an alternate on that. And so, because you're an alternate, if you are put on as a permanent person, why, then I think that would be a good position to be. Otherwise, we need to either find another person or whatever. But regardless of who's on that committee of three, I hope that all of us on the commission contribute to, you know, finding people that'll help us and then, you know, getting involved in the process. So I talked to Roger, and he said that he would take that spot if we wanted to, you know, appoint him because he is a permanent member. Roger Japp, and he said we could even, you know, nominate him and pass a vote that he's it, that he would, you know, be okay with that, even though he's not here to defend himself.
Mr. Hayter, would that be an appropriate action since Mr. Japp isn't here to verify that statement, or do we need to wait for Mr. Japp for his attendance?
Well, I do think that because this is an action that you're taking that isn't necessarily noticed, that you might want to wait to the next meeting and actually put this on the agenda so that the public is aware that you're taking action on that item. So I'm more concerned from just a transparency, openness, and compliance with the open meetings laws at this point about not having noticed that item before taking that action.
Agreed. Yeah, so we will need to add that to the next meeting's agenda to have as a talking point.
Cool.
Any other commissions?
Council put us on a 90-day follow-up, so we got to get busy. And Susan, who is the person, Susan Noble, who is the person from the council that's appointed, she's called me twice in the last couple of weeks and saying where we stand. So we'll.
I think they gave us some leeway, though, to come back to them if for some reason we
Absolutely.
needed
Yeah,
some
I was
additional
fe-
time.
we'll-
And I
we'll
think
give you a
losing our
report and-
chairman might
We'll
be a
give you a report
good,
in 90 days, but
Yeah,
no
with a-
promises,
good
you know.
reason.
With a vacancy, losing the chair, and then we, as we're standing at 4, need a
And-
fifth, and yes,
And with a new person coming on the council, why it's,
Yeah.
yes. Any other commission business?
another reason to not get it done.
Any other business? Seeing none, is there any attorney business?
I have nothing for you this evening. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there any staff business?
No, sir.
Will there be a meeting next month?
Yes. Most likely there'll be a March meeting.
Thank you. The time is now 8:18. As there's no more business, that we will now adjourn the meeting. Thank you.